Welcome back, my dark hearts. They said she was chosen, a blessing for the fields, a promise to the flame. But the harvest always asks for more than it's given. And tonight, the fire waits, like a mouth that remembers the taste. Stay close to the light and listen. In the hollows, where old ways cling to the soil like stubborn roots, you'll find towns like Brindle Creek. It's a quiet place, bound by fields of whispering corn and traditions that run deeper than any well. Their harvest festival wasn't just a celebration, it was a pact, sealed each year with a ritual they called the cornbread. The chosen girl, a daughter of the town, would dance a dress woven from straw and spun with golden thread. She'd lead the townsfolk in a prayer to bless the fields that fed them. Then as twilight bled across the sky, her likeness's straw effigy, made in her image, would be offered to the fire, a thank you note written in smoke to the hungry earth. It was a quaint, harmless custom, after all. The town's pride had always fed the soil, far more than their crops ever did. This year, the honor, if you could call it, that fell to Clara Bell. She was the miller's daughter, with a laugh as bright as the creek in springtime, and a sensible streak that found such old superstitions charmingly foolish. When the town elders came to her with the news, she simply smiled and agreed to play her part. "It's just a harmless tradition," she told her father, brushing a strand of golden hair from her eyes. She saw it as a game, a bit of pageantry before the winter snows came to quiet the world. "A harmless tradition," she said. But tradition, like the soil, has a long and unforgiving memory. On the morning of the ceremony, a stillness fell over Brindle Creek that had nothing to do with the crisp autumn air. Clara Bell was gone, her bed was made, her window was latched, but the girl herself had vanished like mist in the morning sun. The sheriff, a man who preferred simple answers to complicated truths, figured she'd run off with some traveling boy, tired of the town's suffocating embrace. But the preacher, his face as grim as a tombstone, saw a darker omen. He stood before the worried crowd, his voice a low rumble of prophecy. "The fields remember who forgets," he warned them, his gaze sweeping over the rustling corn. The ritual, he insisted, could not be delayed. The soil was waiting for its due. That evening, the festival began, though a nervous quiet replaced the usual cheer. In the center of the town square, the effigy stood waiting, bound to a heavy wooden post. It wore Clara's gown, a half-finished weave of straw and gold thread that seemed to mock the empty space she'd left behind. The townsfolk gathered, their faces painted in the flickering light of the torches they carried. A hymn rose into the air, a familiar melody now laced with a thread of unease. The preacher raised his hand, and the torches were lowered. Fire licked at the dry straw, crawling up the base of the figure in greedy tongues of orange and red. For a moment, it was beautiful, fleeting sculpture, a flame against the deepening twilight. The crowd, eager to believe in a comforting rhythm of their ritual, began to cheer, their voices rising to drown out their doubt. But their cheers caught in their throats as the figure on the post did something an effigy should never do. It moved. It wasn't the wind. The straw figure twisted, straining against the ropes that held it fast. A scream ripped through the hymn, a sound so raw and terrified it could only have been born from human lungs. It was Clara's voice. For one terrible, frozen moment, the world held its breath. The singing stopped, the cheers die. There was only the sound of the crackling fire, and that one awful choked-off cry. Then the flames surged, roaring higher, swallowing the sound and the sight of the struggling form consuming the town's terrible mistake in a column of blinding light. When the inferno finally died down to embers, leaving a ghost of smoke hanging in the night air, only ashes remain. A few brave souls stepped forward to inspect the charred post, their faces pale in the moonlight. Tucked within the blackened wood, they found fragments of bone, white against the soot. They found melted clumps of golden thread. And there, fused to the grain of the post by the heat, was Clarabelle's gold hair ribbon, a final, silent accusation. No one in Brindle Creek ever spoke of that night again. The silence became its own ritual, a shared guilt that settled over the town like a permanent frost. The next spring, the corn grew with a disturbing vigor, thicker and taller, and a richer shade of gold than anyone could remember. The harvest was impossibly bountiful, but at night, when the wind moved through the stalks, it carried a sound that was almost like weeping Ba. And every harvest since, just as the sun dips below the horizon, a figure is said to appear in the heart of the filter. Slender silhouette, dressed in straw, crowned in firelight gold, forever watching the town that fed her to the soil. How unfortunate. The fire's out, for now. Go on, subscribe and see what still burns in the next tale. I'll meet you there.